Today's topic, call to action. What is a call to action and why you need a really effective call to action to really get an impact out of your videos?
Well, let's hear from the big guy on this. What is the textbook definition of call to action?
Something such as a speech, piece of writing, or act that asks or encourages people to take action.
Somewhat helpful, but it doesn't cover off everything that we need to know about call to action. So one of the big questions that we hear is, how many calls to action do I need?
That's a really good question because it depends on what you're making and it depends on what the call to action is. So I could put a call to action right here now. Subscribe to this so you don't miss another episode. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. So that's one form of a call to action.
Yeah, and I think as a general rule, one is better than many, but it's not a blanket thing. Sometimes a story can accommodate more than one call to action. They need to work together really well. They need to be cohesive as a set, like additive, like, you know, you could do this and this and this, but they all make sense like as a concept so that the viewer goes, I can do one of three things all in the same direction. Often people jam too many calls to action in, and that's a problem because you get no results.
I think the biggest mistake people make is adding too many calls to action at the end of a video, and I'm talking more about YouTube videos here, not feature-length documentaries or cinema films that have a call to action. I'm talking about, you know, at the end of this video, for example, if I was to say, make sure you subscribe to our channel so you don't miss another episode. And we'd love it if you'd leave us a comment because it's really helpful. And don't forget, we're also on Instagram, Twitter, and also Facebook. And we'd love to hear from you over there. By the time you've done all that,
send us an email.
Yes,
You know.
so everyone's just like, that's way too much. I just need one thing. Give me one thing to do.
It's a good example though, because you can have a cohesive set. So because of the tools on some platforms like YouTube, you know, you've mentioned that, there's a cohesive set of actions that you can take there. You can, you know, you can like, you can share, you can comment, you can subscribe. Those things can be bundled more comfortably than something that's really disparate and then just ends up causing confusion. And what you get when you have confusion with your audience around a call to action is no action. And that's not the purpose of a call to action. You want them to take an action, and probably settling on one primary action is going to be the safest way to get that outcome.
And as I was saying, you know, it depends on what you're producing and what the platform is. I mean, Netflix and Amazon are masters at the call to action. You know, watch the next episode. They get you binging because they're just so clever in the way that they just get you to go from one episode to the next episode. You're staying on their platform, you're just consuming more and more and more. But if
There's one thing they're asking you to do. And
yeah.
when they ask you to do more than one thing, like, you know, there's this new thing on Netflix, I think it is, you know, did you like it? Did you love it? Or didn't you like it? It's too many. It's too many things. I just, you know, just serve up the next one. I'll leave it to the AI. I know some people are into that, but it's just like, you know, like,
I don't want to be interactive on Netflix.
That's another thing. So just give them one thing to do, you know, settle on that. I'd like to, you know, hear your thoughts here about the positioning of the call to action as well. Like, where do you actually place the call to action?
I think traditionally calls to action are always at the end, and I still think that that holds true. That is the most important call to action, is at the end of your content, be it a video, a TV series, or a movie in the cinemas. That's where your audience is going to immediately take an action if they've watched it all the way through to the end because they are super engaged. But when you're talking about YouTube, it's pretty common for people to only watch the first part of your video. So I think actually having a call to action right up at the very sort of beginning part of your video can also be really useful, and that doesn't necessarily have to be the same call to action. So that's where you can get your variety in, because maybe you want your audience to subscribe, but maybe you also want them to comment, and maybe you also want them to share it. So you can pepper that throughout. And then maybe you've got a companion podcast, like we've got the Moonshine Moonshot companion podcast. So you might be trying to pepper that in as well.
That's super helpful. So always at the end, or almost always at the end, let's say it that way, and punctuated throughout is often a good way to go with a call to action, unless you've got a captive audience. I think if you know you've got a captive audience where, for example, they're gathering in one room and watching a film together, then you can get away with just one at the end.
Yeah, and it wouldn't make sense in a feature film or a documentary feature to have it punctuated with calls to action throughout. You would traditionally have that at the end.
Yep. So I think the last thing we need to talk about is what is the action and how do you get people to take the action?
Yeah, and that comes down to what's the story and what do you need people to do. So if it's YouTube, you need people to subscribe or you need them to share your video so that you can have more people find and watch your content. You need that. Whereas if you've got a feature documentary that's an impact film that you need people to take an action at the end that progresses that cause, it could be something totally different. It could be about lobbying their local minister through letter writing. It could be about making a donation. It could be to share the film. It could be, there's so many different things.
Yeah, and I find it's actually helpful to map this out, this action journey that you want people to take. Because if it's a bit removed from the process of watching a video, then you might need to add some interim steps into it. So for example, if you're making a sustainability video and you want people to, let's say, recycle better, when they're at the point of watching the video, they're probably a bit distant from where they're doing their recycling, right? So they might not be able to respond instantly to what you're asking them to do in that moment, which means you might need some interim steps like sign up to email newsletter, or download an app or whatever that is going to be more helpful to them in a location-based environment to actually take the action that you want. So you need to map that out and take them on a journey potentially, and then you just want to get them started. So you might say in a call to action like that, we want you to recycle more effectively, and the first step is sign up to this.
I think that's a really good point, and I think with what you're talking about there on the journey, if you're producing a series of content, it's a little different if you're doing like a one-off documentary, but if you're doing a series of content for anything really, but say it's a YouTube series, the first time you ask people to subscribe, they're probably not going to because they're not familiar with your platform and they're not sure, they like it, but they don't know if they really want to see it all the time. But once they've watched 2 or 3 videos, and in each of those videos you've asked them to subscribe, the chances of them then subscribing goes up dramatically because, you've got the rapport with them. They understand what your content is and they know that they want to see more of it. So you've built that rapport and you've created that opportunity by being repetitious with the same call to action over and over.
I think that's really helpful. So that brings us to our call to action for today.
Subscribe! We'd love it if you subscribe to our channel because it helps us know that you like the content we're producing and then we can produce more content.